So today we are going to look at the circulatory system in humans. When we talk about the circulatory system, it is made up of the vessels, fluid in the vessels, and the muscles that help and control the flow of blood in the body. Thus, the circulatory system is also responsible for transporting materials throughout the entire body. It transports nutrients, water, and oxygen to billions of body cells and carry away wastes such as carbon dioxide that the body cells produce. So, in a nutshell, we have various parts of the circulatory system in humans. The circulatory system in humans is made or divided into three main parts. These parts are the heart, which pumps the blood, which is the medium of transport, and the blood vessels, which is the route through which the blood flows. In our next slide, we are going to look at one of those components. So, in a nutshell, we are going to look at each and every component into details. So the very first one we are going to look at is the heart itself. Now, the heart is a pear-shaped organ located in the center of the chest, slightly to the left side between two lungs. Its job is to pump blood and keep the blood moving throughout the body. The heart beats about 3 million times during an average lifetime. To the right of our screen, we have the various parts of the heart, which we refer to as the anatomy of the heart. You can identify the aorta, the superior vena cava, the pulmonary valve, the right atrium, the tricuspid valve, the right ventricle, the inferior vena cava, the septum, the left ventricle, the aortic valve, the mitral valve, the left atrium, the pulmonary vein, and the pulmonary artery. These parts of the heart will be dealt into details later, subsequently. So we proceed to look at the parts of the heart. Naturally, the parts of the heart is made up of 4 chambers. These 4 chambers are the left atrium, which is also called the auricle. And we have the right atrium, which is also called the right auricle. We have the left ventricle and the right ventricle. On the screen, this is the right atrium. This is the right ventricle. The left atrium is somewhere here, and then the left. So these are the chambers that we are referring to. So we are now going to look at the various parts and the role they play. So I will indulge you to have by you the various parts of the heart as a diagram beside you so as you can follow the narration that is going to take place. So we have the vena cava. Vena cava is the point where all deoxygenated blood returns. Is also responsible for receiving deoxygenated blood from the vena cava. Tricuspid valve. Like any other valve, valves prevent the backflow of blood. So the tricuspid valve prevents backflow of blood from the pulmonary artery into the right ventricle when the right ventricle relaxes. The right ventricle. The right ventricle pumps blood to the lungs through the pulmonary artery. It carries deoxygenated blood from the heart to the lungs for gaseous exchange. Pulmonary vein. It carries oxygenated blood from the lungs to the left atrium of the heart. So we proceed to the next slide, and we have the bicuspid valve. The bicuspid valve prevents the backflow of blood from the left ventricle into the left auricle. The left ventricle. The left ventricle pumps blood to all parts of the body, with the exception of the lungs. Left atrium. Left atrium receives oxygenated blood from the lungs through the pulmonary vein, aorta. So we come to the aorta. Now the aorta carries oxygenated blood from the heart to all parts of the body except the lungs. Interventricular septum. This prevents deoxygenated blood from mixing with oxygenated blood. So we come to the other part, which is the sequence of flow of the blood through the mammalian heart from the tissue. So as an organogram, we have the deoxygenated blood from the tissue, vena cava, from the vena cava to the right auricle, through the tricuspid valve to the right ventricle, to the pulmonary artery, to the lungs for oxygen, pulmonary veins, left auricle, through bicuspid valve, left ventricle, aorta, to all parts of the body with the exception of the lungs, where the oxygen is used for respiration. But what is on the screen now, it summarizes the sequence of blood, the flow of blood in the heart. It also indicates the various four chambers that we have identified from the very beginning. So look at it. So we have the right atrium, right ventricle, left atrium, and the left ventricle, which makes up the four chambers. Now, one notable thing about to differentiate between blood that is oxygenated and blood that is deoxygenated. So on our left, these blue colors indicates that this blood do not contain oxygen, whilst on our right, the red color here indicates that that part contains oxygen, and so it is labeled as red color. Now, this structure here called the septum is what divides the heart into two parts. It is such that it prevents the oxygenated blood, which is in blue, from mixing with the oxygenated blood, which is in red. So we proceed. Now we're going to look at the other component, which is the blood. Now blood, people do see and say that it is red, but the color of blood is actually not red. The color is a straw-colored material. We shall delve into that. Now the blood is composed of the following, which is the blood plasma, and that happens to be the liquid portion of the blood. And then we have the blood cells, which is the solid part of the blood. Now, the solid part of the blood is also further made up of various components, such as the red blood cells, the white blood cells, and the blood platelets. So, we are also going to look at each and every component under the blood cells. And we have the blood plasma. Like I said, the color of blood is synonymous to that of the color of the plasma, and so the plasma is a straw-colored liquid part of the blood, which consists of 90% water and 10% dissolved substances. These dissolved substances include mineral salts, hormones, enzymes, waste products such as carbon dioxide and urea, and then soluble foods from digestion. From the diagram, you can see the plasma, which is the liquid portion, and then we have the other parts, the red blood cells, the white blood cells, and then the blood platelets in there. So they together form the blood, and then we have the other components in there. So we move to the red blood cells. From the diagram, the illustration that we have there, you see the red blood cells together with the white blood cells and the blood platelets. Now red blood cells, as they are in structure, are biconcave discs. They are very tiny and numerous. They do not have nuclei. They contain hemoglobin, which is the red pigment of the blood. The hemoglobin transports oxygen from the lungs to the cells. The red blood cells are formed in the marrow of bones and are released into the blood. White blood cells. White blood cells play a part in the body's defense and give immunity against diseases. So they are basically known as the cells that help to fight against diseases in the body. The body has a natural mechanism of fighting diseases, and the white blood cells are responsible for that. Now, they attack and eat foreign bodies such as bacteria and viruses that enter the body. They also produce antibodies which destroy virus, bacterial, and toxin they produce. The white blood cells are colorless with clear or granulated cytoplasm and are capable of independent amoeboid movement. The blood platelets. They are tiny or minute fragments of cells. Their main function is to help the blood to clot during injuries. They have no nucleus. They are made in the red bone marrow. So you can see the blood platelets in the diagram. Now, the general importance of why the blood must clot when there is a cut is that it prevents excessive bleeding that may lead to death. It prevents entry of microorganisms into the body. So, from the functions of the various components of blood, that is the blood plasma, red blood cells, white blood cells, blood platelets, we can collectively come up with the functions of the blood. Now, the functions of the blood are: it helps the body to defend itself against diseases. It contains white blood cells and antibiotics that destroy invading bacteria. It carries oxygen from the lungs to the body tissues. It also distributes heat in the body to regulate body temperature. The blood plasma carries waste products, mostly urea, from the liver to the kidney to be excreted as urine. And last but not the least, it carries the absorbed foods from the gut to different parts of the body. So we are going to look at the blood vessels, which happens to be the third component of the circulatory system. Now, blood vessels are tubes through which blood flows around the body. Their appearance varies depending on the job they perform. There are three types of blood vessels, namely arteries, which is singularly called an artery; capillaries, which is known as a capillary; and then veins, which is known as a vein. Now, the picture here depicts the three forms of blood vessels connected to each other. So the red color indicates blood moving through an artery. The blue color depicts blood moving through a vein. And then the middle part indicates the connection between the arteries and the veins. So we're going to delve further into this particular picture. Now let's look at arteries. Arteries are blood vessels that carry blood away from the heart. Apart from the pulmonary artery, the arteries carry mainly blood with oxygen, which we refer to as oxygenated blood. The artery has an elastic outer layer known as tunica adventitia, thicker smooth muscle layer also known as tunica intima. The artery also has a small hole known as lumen. And so you can see the structure here: tunica adventitia, and the other parts labeled there. Okay, so we move to the veins, and the structure here indicates the differences between an artery and a vein. When you look at it, you see that an artery is very large and it has a smaller lumen as compared to the vein, which is having a bigger lumen, but the muscular structure is thin, and then the capillary is the smallest among them. So arteries are the biggest, followed by the veins, and then the capillaries. Now, veins carry blood back to the heart under lower pressure. They also have three layers: a thin outer layer known as the tunica external, an elastic and smooth layer also known as the tunica media, and then a muscular inner layer known as the tunica intima. Now, veins, with the exception of the pulmonary vein, carry deoxygenated blood that has been used by body tissue back to the heart. Now, veins are smaller, thinner, and much less elastic than arteries. Blood in veins does not experience as much pressure as blood in arteries. Veins contain valves to prevent the backflow of blood. They also have larger lumen or hole. So we continue from that to the next. So we now look at the blood capillaries, and this picture here indicates the structure of a blood capillary. Now, they are very fine blood vessels which have holes in them with very thin walls. Now, there are tiny gaps between the cells making up the wall of the capillary. These allow substances such as glucose, oxygen, urea, and carbon dioxide to leave the blood and bath the cells of the tissues. They connect the veins to the arteries, making circulation of blood possible. Let's now look at the differences between veins and arteries. Now, veins carry blood to the heart, whilst arteries carry blood away from the heart. Veins carry deoxygenated blood with the exception of pulmonary artery, the pulmonary vein rather, and then arteries carry oxygenated blood with the exception of pulmonary artery. Veins have valves, arteries have no valves. Veins carry blood under lower pressure, arteries carry blood under high pressure. Veins have inelastic walls, arteries have thicker elastic walls. Veins are located close to the surface of the skin, while arteries are located deep in the muscle. And finally, veins, blood flows through them smoothly, whilst in arteries, blood flows in pulses. So let's go on. So we are going to look at some diseases of the circulatory system. Now, the common diseases are high blood pressure, also known as hypertension, low blood pressure, known as hypotension, leukemia, which is blood cancer, varicose veins, hemorrhoids, known as piles, stroke, arteriosclerosis. So in this picture, this is a varicose vein. So you see that the leg of the person, the veins have popped out. Okay, unlike a normal vein where you won't see anything of that kind. And then on the right here, you have the arteriosclerosis, which shows that the lumen in the tube of the artery has been reduced. So these are some of the pictures that we can show. Now we proceed to look at what blood pressure is. So blood pressure can be defined as the pressure of blood on the walls of the arteries as it circulates through the body. Causes of blood pressure, of high blood pressure specifically. The exact causes of high blood pressure are not known, but several factors and conditions may play a role in its development, including smoking, being overweight or obese, lack of physical activity, too much salt in diet, too much alcohol consumption, stress, older age, genetics, family history of high blood pressure, and then chronic kidney disease. Now, signs and symptoms of high blood pressure are fatigue, shortness of breath, coughing, fluid retention, and weight gain, loss of appetite, abnormal fast or low heart beat. So we look at how to manage or control high blood pressure. So we cultivate the habit of eating more fruits and vegetables. Avoid intake of too much salt, and also eat food that contain less salt. Avoid eating canned food such as sardine, corned beef. Have enough rest all the time. Avoid smoking cigarettes, marijuana, etc. Stop taking alcoholic drinks. Exercise regularly. Avoid eating food with high cholesterol. Example, pork. So we come to the very last slide for this topic on circulatory system in humans. So the causes of low blood pressure, we have malnutrition, loss of blood from bleeding, low body temperature, high body temperature, heart muscle disease causing heart failure, severe blood infection, severe dehydration, some over-the-counter medications which have not been prescribed by the physician, abnormal heart rhythms, widening or dilation of the blood vessels. So the ways of controlling the high blood pressure and managing it also goes for that of the lower blood pressure. Thank you, and let's meet again for another lesson.